General Hospital, spoilers for May 2026, offer quite a bit of drama for fans. I have some exciting news and predictions for you, so stay tuned to see what might happen. I've been following General Hospital for a long time, and right now I honestly feel the show is building something messy, theatrical, and very dangerous underneath the surface. The hottest real-world setup, in my opinion, is the Broadway crossover. Michael James Scott is set to appear as himself and perform Friend Like Me at the Savoy on the May 4 episode, while Jonathan Bennett is also joining the soap as the new character Joe Fitzpatrick with a May debut. That alone tells me the show wants attention, spectacle, and a few shockwaves all at once. What I think makes this especially interesting is that all of these moving parts feel connected by one theme: hidden identities, power grabs, and people pretending they are more in control than they really are. I could be wrong, of course, but my interpretation is that May is shaping up to be a month where several characters overplay their hands and the fallout is going to hit fast. The first thing I keep coming back to is Michael James Scott's appearance. I do not think this is being brought in only as a fun cameo. I feel like General Hospital is using the Savoy event as a stylish entry point for a bigger emotional and social shift in Port Charles. If I were reading this scene the way the writers want me to read it, I would say the atmosphere is basically screaming something else is about to happen while everyone is distracted by the performance. That is exactly the kind of setup the show loves. Glamour on the surface, chaos underneath. And that is why I do not buy the idea that this crossover is just a harmless musical detour. I think it may be the calm before a chain reaction. In my opinion, the moment a big guest appearance lands in the middle of a soap, somebody nearby usually has something to hide, something to lose, or something to exploit. Gio arranging this visit feels meaningful to me, because it suggests he is not just passing through a filler scene. I think he could end up looking like a connector character, someone who accidentally pulls people together at the exact wrong moment. Now, on to Joe Fitzpatrick. Jonathan Bennett joining the show as a newly created character tells me the writers want a fresh chess piece on the board, not just another background face. I think Joe is going to matter quickly, and I would not be surprised if he enters Port Charles with an easy smile and a far sharper agenda than people expect. My instinct is that he will not arrive as a random nice guy. I think he may be a fixer, an operative, or at minimum, someone who knows how to read a room and use it. The reason I keep circling back to Joe is because General Hospital loves introducing a new male wildcard when the balance of power is shifting. In my opinion, that means Joe Fitzpatrick could become useful to more than one faction. He might align with Sonny, but I do not think that necessarily means loyalty. I think it could mean convenience. If Sonny is missing Jason, if Sonny is under pressure, if Sonny needs muscle or information, then Joe could step into the vacuum. But I feel that this replacement for Jason idea is too simple on the surface. I think the show may want viewers to assume Joe is filling a role, when in reality he might be creating a whole new problem. That brings me to the bigger emotional engine in the story, which I think is Willow. In my opinion, Willow is being written as someone who has crossed too many lines to ever go back to being fully trusted. I do not think she is playing a clean game anymore. I think she's the kind of character who can convince herself that every move is necessary, even when it is obviously cruel, and that is what makes her dangerous. The Kai and Trina angle, to me, is one of the most explosive threads in the prompt. I think the key issue is not just that they know too much, it is that Willow probably feels exposed by them. Once a character like Willow feels cornered, I do not think she retreats. I think she retaliates. My personal take is that she might try to weaponize the situation around Drew, turning other people into shields so she can protect herself. If she can plant suspicion elsewhere, then she buys time. That is exactly the sort of move I could imagine her making. Not proving innocence, but spreading enough confusion to keep everyone distracted. And if I am being honest, I feel like Willow's real weakness is that she thinks she is still the smartest person in the room. That kind of delusion is what makes a soap villain or anti-hero so compelling. She may believe she is managing the story, but I think the story is actually managing her. The more she lashes out, the more evidence she creates against herself. I could easily see her trying to frame Kai and Trina in a way that initially looks clever but then collapses because she overlooked one tiny detail. That is the kind of downfall I think the show loves to engineer. Then there is Jacinda. I think Jacinda represents a very specific threat to Willow. Not a grand enemy, but an inconvenient witness, a disruption, a person who can keep dragging the truth into the light. That is often more dangerous than a dramatic rival. In my opinion, Willow does not just dislike Jacinda. She likely sees her as a contaminant in the story she wants to tell about herself and Wiley and Amelia. I think Willow may believe she is protecting her family, but I feel the show could frame this as possession rather than protection. If Willow moves against Jacinda, I think the most important part is not the act itself, but what it reveals. I think it would show that Willow is willing to hurt anyone she associates with interference. And that is where Michael becomes relevant in a very different way. If Michael realizes Willow has gone after someone close to him, I think his response could be far more personal and far less forgiving than Willow expects. In my view, that is where the emotional stakes get ugly fast. Willow may think she is operating in a controlled battlefield. I think she is actually provoking a much larger war. Sasha's possible return also feels huge to me, because I see her as one of the few people who can walk back into this chaos and instantly shift the emotional temperature. I think Sasha has the kind of energy that makes everyone else reveal more than they planned. If she comes back with any connection to Willow's past behavior, then I believe that creates a powerful reckoning. My personal speculation is that Sasha would not just be another obstacle for Willow, she would be a moral mirror. Sasha could force people to confront what has been done to the children, the families, and the trust in this town. I also think Ethan's return matters more than it first appears. In my opinion, Ethan is not there just to be a nostalgic face. He feels like a bridge character, someone who can link older storylines to new revenge plots. If I were mapping the emotional energy of the month, I would say Ethan is being positioned as a catalyst for resistance. He might be the kind of person who sees the bigger pattern before everyone else does. I can imagine him helping Sunny not because he is perfectly aligned with Sunny, but because he recognizes a common enemy and understands that timing matters. The Sidwell and Cullum angle, to me, is pure soap gasoline. I think the second a revenge plan begins to form, the show is already setting up complications. I do not believe Sunny and Ethan will glide through this cleanly. I feel like they may get close to success and still end up paying a physical or emotional price. That is often how General Hospital works. The victory comes with blood on the floor. My guess is that one of them gets injured, or a rescue goes wrong, or an ally turns out to be compromised. And then there is the possibility that Ethan knows where Jason is being held. I find that idea especially juicy, because it would make Ethan a gateway to one of the biggest emotional payoffs in the whole canvas. I think Jason's absence has to keep meaning something, otherwise the show wastes all that tension. My interpretation is that the writers may be saving Jason's location reveal for a moment when it hurts and helps at the same time. If Ethan is involved in that discovery, then his return becomes much more than a side story. It becomes a turning point. Britt is another piece I cannot ignore. I feel very strongly that her role in this web is not going to stay quiet for long. In my opinion, Britt is one of those characters whose presence automatically suggests secrets, medical information, protection, and a huge emotional cost. If she finds Jason, I do not think it will be a neat reunion. I think it could turn into a trap. My personal theory is that Britt might get too close to the truth, and then the truth becomes a cage around her instead. That is why the idea of Britt being held where Jason is being held feels so dramatic to me. I think the show would love that reversal. Instead of Britt being the rescuer, she becomes part of the captive story. In my mind, that creates a much darker tone. It turns rescue into containment and hope into leverage. If Cullum is involved. I suspect he will not just be angry, he will be vindictive. And if he connects Brit to the Jason situation, I think that could trigger a brutal escalation. Rocco, meanwhile, feels like another character who could be positioned to cause collateral damage. I do not think the show uses a young troublemaker like that by accident. In my opinion, the purpose of Rocco is to create situations where adults make bad choices in order to protect, punish, or cover up. That is classic soap structure. I can absolutely imagine Rocco causing a problem that then becomes everyone else's disaster. If someone gets hurt because of him, I think the real story will not be the accident itself, but the chain of blame that follows. Cassius pretending to be Nathan is one of the most dramatic ideas in the whole prompt, and I honestly think that if this is where the story goes, the emotional blowback will be massive. I feel that Lulu, in particular, would react like someone who has been psychologically violated, not just tricked, but destabilized. In my opinion, a fake Nathan is the sort of reveal that does not just embarrass people, it makes them question every moment they spent believing a lie. If Brit is the one who exposes that disguise, then I think her role becomes even more complicated, because she goes from observer to detonator. I also think Lucas could become one of the most underrated pressure points in all of this. My sense is that Lucas is exactly the type of character who can get buried under other people's mess until suddenly he has the one detail that breaks everything open. I would not be surprised if he gets dragged into the Marco situation unfairly and then shifts from victim to investigator. In my opinion, that is a very interesting direction because it gives him agency without making him a superhero. He just has to be smart, observant, and angry enough to connect the dots. And the phone clue? I think that is the kind of small object soaps love to turn into a giant battlefield. One phone can hold a text, a call, a location, a voice memo, or one tiny truth that destroys a whole lie. My personal take is that the phone will matter not because it is flashy, but because it is inconvenient. It is the sort of evidence that makes powerful people panic. If Lucas gets there first, then I think the game changes. If someone else gets there first, then Lucas may become the next person they try to silence. What I keep feeling through all of this is that May 2026 may not be about one single explosion. I think it is more likely to be a slow ignition across several fronts. Broadway glamour, new arrivals, secret identities, revenge plots, missing people, and old wounds all seem to be converging. I do not think the show is trying to hand us a neat pattern. I think it wants us uneasy. It wants us guessing who is lying, who is captive, who is playing both sides, and who is about to get exposed in the worst possible way. So, my final read is this. I think the most dangerous thing in Port Charles right now is not any one villain, but the way everyone is underestimating how connected these stories are. Joe Fitzpatrick may look like a fresh face, Michael James Scott may look like a dazzling crossover event, and Willow may look like she is simply scrambling to survive. But I feel those pieces are all feeding the same storm. I could be wrong, but this is just my interpretation, and I genuinely think the next wave of episodes could turn one of these small developments into a massive emotional collapse. And that is exactly why I keep asking myself one question. When the dust starts to settle, who is going to be standing, and who is going to be the one everyone realizes they misread from the very beginning?